Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and I'm thrilled today that I get to, I was going to say sit down, but I'm standing. I get to chat with my friend, Nate Costa of FX Studios and FX Well. Nate, how are you doing today?
Doing amazing. How about you, buddy?
Doing well. The sun is shining. I'm standing. This time last year, I was in a boot, so I'm just happy to be, alive and healthy. So yeah, for our listeners out there, obviously I know you fairly well. I've gotten to know you a little bit better over the last, I guess, few years, which is awesome. And but some of our listeners out there may not know who you are. So if you would, who is Nate Costa and what are you up to today?
Wow. Who is Nate Costa? Well, president, founder of these two great companies, FX Studios and FX Well. Father to three amazing boys, and the lucky husband of Gina.
Nice. Well, those are several important hats you're wearing, I'd say. Um, I know you've got tell us briefly a little bit more about your two businesses, and then we'll go back in time a little bit.
So FX Studios originally started not by me, but by a guy who dreamed up a very unique salon and spa. And he was one of my personal training clients. And somehow convinced him to let me, my brother, and my one other good friend to add on a small personal training studio. So FX Studios started as a salon, but then it kind of evolved into a fitness component to it. And then FX Well, a few years later, was our kind of corporate wellness company that mainly does fitness center management and design. We do what we call human engagement, which whether that's virtually or on-site events. And then we have a digital fitness app also that we've built.
So what is you were mentioning some employee numbers to me before we hit record. What do all of the businesses look like from a kind of human standpoint or personnel standpoint?
Yeah, I think we're just over 250 teammates now.
Oh, that's
Mainly
a
kind
lot.
of across the country, but mainly Maryland and Texas.
Gotcha. Okay, and I know you've we may hit on this, but you've had the opportunity to also personally train some key athletes, like NFL players. Do you mind mentioning a couple of those before we go back in your history?
Yeah, the kind of two big names are Cam Newton, quarterback for the Panthers. Looks like he's finally going to retire there.
Yeah.
And he never wants to, though. And then Randall Cobb, who's now back at the Packers. One of the most amazing individuals both of those guys are that I've ever actually, from an athlete standpoint, gotten to work with.
That's awesome.
And some other ones, Flacco, when he was here in Baltimore, got to work with him a little bit, and Torrey Smith, who again is just, off the football field, just such an upstanding individual.
That's awesome. And you forgot to mention Jamie Bateman and Joe Coy, but we'll
Dude, stellar athletes.
Especially in our mid 40s. We're looking real strong these days. But anyway, let's back up a little bit and you can pick it up whether it's 2005, 2006, wherever we want to start there, but kind of walk through the history of FX and some of the business challenges, if you would, that you've faced, and how you've been able to face those from a more personal and human standpoint, and what lessons you've learned from that. I know that's a lot that I just threw at you, but where do you want to start? Is it the 2005 timeframe?
Yeah, let's go back to kind of the beginning, and obviously interject because I can start telling these
No
stories
worries.
and
It's all good.
So Yeah, I mean, it kind of all started where I was working for, a big box gym in Baltimore that, I wanted to do more. And fortunately, the owners were like, go and kind of, chase your dreams, man. And I'm like, okay. So I started looking at, how do I build my own personal training studio and what would that look like? And, what are the main things that I really, as an individual want to do? And
Hmm.
the thing that draws me to the health and wellness fitness industry really is helping other people. Like my
Sure.
bucket's filled when I get to go, to Joe's house on a Saturday morning and the three of us go down in his basement gym and we
Yeah.
leave there feeling like we sweated, we got some good combos and it was
Yeah.
it was like you guys, those are fun workouts.
Yeah.
And there's a level that I get from that of like appreciation and just the joy. The like I just wanted to multiply that. And so the dream was build a place that has 10 trainers. We each have about 40 clients, change the lives of 400 people. And one of my personal training clients had opened FX Studios, the salon, a year prior to this in '04, and somehow we convinced him to let us add on, this 2,700 square foot personal training studio,
Hmm.
which is just comical to me now, just thinking of the massive square footage places that we are in now. But
So you were training him, right? You were his trainer, is what you're saying?
yep, I
Yeah.
was the trainer. And so basically it took us a year to negotiate with the landlord to add on this, space. And then the guy that previously owned FX Studios was adding on a larger spa. And we were putting like a mutual locker room in between it. And during that year that we were building out, we basically took to the Oregon Ridge Hills here in Baltimore and did
Mm-hmm.
what we called outdoor fitness. So
Mm-hmm.
we would have times of the day we'd have groups show up and we would train them outside, and then I would still drive around to people's homes and
I
train
think
them.
I've seen some pictures of Cam Newton, you and Cam Newton on
Running
those
that
hills.
running
He
that
is
hill.
he's absolutely shredded. Not that you weren't, Nate, not that you
Oh
weren't,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
but
Well,
yeah,
six,
that's
250, 3% body fat.
it's
You're pushing
ridiculous.
easily.
Yeah, so okay, so it took you a year to build out the physical location, right? Is that
Yes.
right?
And a lot of it was just because of the details. For those that know FX Studios, like it's all about the experience. And
Mm-hmm.
so from a haircut side, you're going into a private room. You at the time you're staring at a big 20-foot movie screen, everything from the shampooing and the washing and happens inside that room, and it's not like somebody else does it. So it was a very different experience. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a few like critical moments in kind of my path,
Mm-hmm.
um, and this was one of them. So a local entrepreneur walked in the door to get a haircut and was just blown away by the experience. And he was like, I need to talk to the owner of this place. And so he went and he was there. And so he got to sit down with the owner and said, hey, I've got this company. I'm actually about to go public. I'm probably going to have a little extra cash. I love this concept. Let's talk about expanding and building them. And the guy that started FX was a very focused individual, let's just say. So he was like, that's not in the game plan. First, we're going
Mm-hmm.
to do this. We're about to add on a fitness center. So let's keep talking. And he was like, wait, a fitness center? He's like, my company is called Under Armour, and I'm in, the number one sports apparel company here, and we're taking over the world. And he's like, and I need a trainer too. So can you introduce me to one of those guys? So, I got to meet Kevin Plank, and
Mm-hmm.
train him. And that was so many years ago now to think of all the journeys. But that was one of those moments in my life that I look back at and go, if that didn't happen, what if, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
crossroads.
Sure.
And from that, experience, we finally did open our doors, kind of late into '06, and we had already built up a pretty great training base. So we hired two trainers that were completely booked and then some in 2 weeks from when we opened our door. And
Wow.
then we brought on another two trainers, and we got a pretty unique model that we still use today. I mean, it's evolved, but where we bring somebody in on salary and we kind of show them the ropes, plug them in. And but just fast forward a couple of years, the guy that originally started FX wanted to exit. And I had, two partners, my brother, who was in the Navy SEALs for 12 years and got out to do this venture with me. Um, and then, one of my best friends at the time, Neil. And so uh, my brother was like, I'm going to go get my MBA. Not sure I really want to buy a salon or run a salon and spa. Like, good luck, you two. And so him and I, took it over. And we also relatively, same time, we opened up a gym down in downtown Baltimore
Mm-hmm.
in a condo high rise where
Mm-hmm.
they came to us and said, hey, will you, build us a gym and then manage it for us so that when we're trying to sell these condos,
Mm-hmm.
that there's some energy and some action, so to
Right.
speak,
Some amenities. Right.
happen.
Gotcha. And now that was a totally separate venture, the condo gym.
Yeah, Silo Point is the development, and
Okay.
it was one of those pretty high end, unique buildings, and
Mm-hmm.
we built a cool, gym in the bottom of it, and
Nice.
shortly after that, and it was, it's probably a quarter mile away. Under Armour came to us and said, "Hey, we just bought all the property that our headquarters is on.
Mm-hmm.
Got this really, crappy gym that's 20 years old, hasn't been updated, key card access. Let's turn it into an awesome gym." And that was
Mm-hmm.
11,000 square feet. And we were, super pumped and excited. And so we built this gym down at Under Armour's headquarters. And that, you think about opportunity, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times when you look at it and you try to, assess like risks, benefits,
Mm-hmm.
just like I do in a workout, like this
Mm-hmm.
exercise, what's the risk and what's the benefit?
Mm-hmm.
So here we are given this opportunity, but with Under Armour, but I'm like, there's no parking. There's not that many people around besides their employees. Um, it's pretty remote, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and so there was a lot of reasons not to do it, to say
Mm-hmm.
the least. And there's definitely some to do it. So we just worked out a great partnership where we created what I love to refer to as a win-win. And
Mm-hmm.
what that really means to me is you got two motivated partners
Yeah.
in this partnership. And it's not a contract, it's like a true
Mm.
partnership. And when you can create that in business,
Yeah.
we've never failed with one of those.
Hmm. So I'll just jump in because I know you're, a humble, quiet guy, and it would be easy for the listener to listen to what you just said and think, well, Nate did some work, but really was just in the right place at the right time, and now he has 250 plus employees, and he's just sipping coffee, talking to Jamie all day. Um, but obviously, that's far from the truth. So, not to spend the whole episode talking about specific challenges, but what were some of the hardest parts of what you just talked about from 2005, for the next, say, 10 years? What were the biggest challenges with regard to the growth that you were, starting the business and then the ensuing growth?
Well, yeah, there's definitely a few. There's always the financial ones that, are hard to forget, where there's a good one. When we first took over FX Studios, um, the timing of payroll and the bank account meaning the bank account had $0 in, and we had
Yeah,
3 days to make a payroll that was for.
I'm laughing because I can relate, but we'll save that for another episode. But yeah, that's not fun. I mean, and it's not. I don't. We're not laughing at not paying people. It's just, it's it's a very real issue. So go ahead. Struggles meeting payroll, right?
Yeah, I mean, so we had 3 days to come up with a significant amount of money, and
Hmm.
again, we sat there and looked at each other like, how are you gonna get like 25 grand? And at this point, it was like 48 hours because we looked at it and we were like, wait, no, there's got to be a way. And then we're like, no, like no magical money's coming into our bank account at this point.
Yep.
And so we went to a mutual friend of ours, and in order for it to clear, it had to be in cash. So we we went to
Yeah.
somebody, basically got a large, brown bag of cash, went to the bank and deposited it, and was like, okay, like, we we made it. Like there was no disruption. And
Nice.
just imagine if, you're like taking over this part of a company that people know who you are, but you're still
Right.
viewed as like the fitness guys. And then you're like, oh
Right.
yeah, sorry, we're not gonna make our first payroll ever.
Just yeah, forget
Yeah,
these guys.
would have been it.
Just come up. You can train me, but I'm not gonna. You're not a business person, right?
Exactly.
So you rode that out, and I imagine you probably had some other similar episodes with
Yes.
payroll and financial
Similar
challenges.
as we grew, and it's crazy to think how small that seems now from a payroll perspective. Um,
Yeah.
but the other big ones for me were, I call it capacity, right? And so um, you've heard me kind of preach this, but you kind of look at your life and from a time perspective in a pie.
Hmm.
And one of my biggest challenges to people I work with is going like, how do you know where your true north is? So like, what does your pie look like? So this much time spent with family, this is friends, this is me time, this is my health,
Hmm.
etc. And life is going to make you shift that. But
Hmm.
if you know where you should shift it back to, you
Hmm.
know that's typically the biggest challenge. A lot of us, I
Hmm.
would imagine, some of these listeners, you go like, yeah, I lifted my head up and it was a year later, 3 years later, and you're still somewhat in the same place. And a
Yeah.
lot of that has to do like, well, where do you want to be, and spending the
Sure.
time and energy to do that. So
Yeah.
I kept sacrificing sleep.
Mm.
Basically was my, biggest thing, where I'm like, I need more hours in the day, and the easiest place to take them from, so I was averaging like 4 hours a night, probably for about 14 years.
Wow.
And
Wow. What just approximately what ages are we talking about?
so I'm turning 45 here in a month, less than a month.
Yeah.
So we're talking up until I was, let's see, 40, COVID factor, 2 years
Mm.
plus now. Yeah. So like 43.
Oh, so we're talking like fairly recent,
Yeah. Pretty
four
much.
hours a night. So, and are you I know Herschel Walker is controversial now in the news, but he he could always work off of like 4 to 6 hours of sleep, and that's all he needed apparently. So I'm guessing you weren't quite like that.
I mean, in my brain, I mean, I'm pretty, so to say, driven. So I was like, I'm
Yeah.
totally fine. I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine.
Right.
And I did sleep studies. I did all kinds of stuff to be that, fraction of a percent that truly only need.
Hmm.
But fast forward, whether it's, life and, more so to say adversity that happens, but
Yeah.
it is going, I actually really like 6 hours of sleep. And I wear
Yeah.
an Aura ring that tracks all kinds of great data, but
Yeah.
literally every day I wake up and it gives me a score. I look at, how
Nice.
well I slept, what my deep, my REM, and I know what I can do to make it better. And so
Hmm.
that awareness of like, yeah, if I don't, stay up watching some mindless TV show just to kind of relax, I'd actually be better going to bed.
Sure. Yep.
Um,
I
but
just got my Whoop band. I'm wearing this now. That's
yeah,
pretty cool. Just started to get into it a little bit, so that's cool. But so was that, did you, sounds like you've since kind of made sleep more of a priority. Was there a reason for that, or how did the lack of sleep end up catching up with you?
honestly, it was more of the awareness around, I just need to do, I preach it, I talk about it, and in my head, I'm
Hmm.
like, well, I'm that exception, right? And
Right.
I don't need that much sleep.
Yeah.
And there's some of those life challenges where I started to internally look at my body,
Mm.
from a, you know, what nutrients am I deficient in? What's my gut biome? Um, what are my food sensitivity markers so that I can tweak these things so that
Hmm.
internally I am operating at, I call like optimal human performance, right? So I
Hmm.
started going down this road of, let's start with myself, and then I can offer it, through this network of FX Well and FX Studios.
Got it. Okay. Makes
And
sense.
it kind of leads in probably to,
Hmm.
there's two of the biggest challenges left to
Yeah.
share. And I won't go in order because
Sure.
it'll feel like the most recent one for me is relevant to kind of starting to look internally from my health, because
Hmm.
just a quick little about me, like I've never done a drug in my life, I've never smoked, I've had 3 alcoholic drinks in my life, um never have taken aspirin or Tylenol or anything. Like I'm a extreme side of like clean and pure. This is, my body will figure it out.
Hmm.
Um, and then supplement side, like protein powder was like the most extreme thing I've ever, had ever done.
Hmm.
Up
Yep.
until a few years ago, where I started to be like, oh, well, my B complex, if I add in that supplement and vitamin D,
Yeah.
and some zinc and magnesium, like these are markers that I measure on a
Yeah.
quarterly basis, and now I see what the difference is, and from a feel perspective is
Hmm.
one, but also from actual like data, like how am I
Right.
sleep, how am I performing, what's my resting heart rate when I'm asleep,
Right.
what's my
But
max heart
that's, but those are informed, just intentional, strategic decisions you're making about that. Then that's not, well, it's extreme for maybe for some people who aren't aware of what's going on with the world you run in, but you weren't a, a juice head, you weren't taking steroids, you weren't, I mean,
rate?
that's, if you get into supplements, it sounds like you were pretty, it's pretty benign. You weren't taking a lot of crazy stuff.
Very natural.
So yes, exactly. So, and then, so in general, other than the sleep, lack of sleep, it seems like you're basically like, well, you should be considered the healthiest in the healthiest of healthy categories, right?
Yeah, and I'm definitely, so to say, viewed that way, right? Where you're like, okay, this guy's pretty fit. He can pretty much, I can go out and do anything. Like I
Yeah.
can go hike Iceland for 5 days. I can go on a 350-mile bike ride with my brother.
Yeah.
And
You can do the David Goggins 4 miles every 4 hours,
yeah, did that a
whatever
couple
that.
times. Like,
Yeah. No big deal.
well, it's not that it's not hard. It's
Yeah.
just,
You're right.
it's very, like, it's very possible.
Sure.
So this journey kind of expanded into, I met a friend of mine, started talking to him more about, he's a concierge primary care doc, um, Dr. Queel, and we started talking about what I'm trying to do, and he was talking about what he's trying to do, which is just change healthcare and the model of it. And so we really hit it off. And then I was fortunate enough to start working with him recently, and he took what I was doing from an internal perspective, to a whole different level. And so he started asking me like, well, what's your family history? And I was like, well, my father had a heart attack and his father had a heart attack, and my mom's side, this. And so he goes, we should probably get a, picture of your heart. Not that you're having any issues or complications, uh,
Hmm.
but it'll give us a baseline. At the time I was like, you're 42, and let's get a look at it. I'm like, sounds like a good idea. Like
Hmm.
I have many sayings, but one of them is data equals awareness and awareness
Hmm.
equals action. So you got to have some data to create an
Hmm.
awareness. But if you
Hmm.
don't do anything with that, then it's pretty much worthless, right? Like you got
Sure.
your Whoop band.
Right.
If that
Right.
doesn't influence
Yeah.
you to make different decisions,
Then
you know, you're wasting a few bucks a month on that stuff,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I'm like, give me more data, buddy. And so fast forward, I go through and get with a cardiologist, Dr. Patar, another amazing individual. And he takes me through the like, okay, let's do just an EKG. And then I'm like, hey, can I do a stress test? And he's like, yeah, I guess so. Uh, and then I'm like, let's do
He's
the
like, I've
next.
never had anyone request one of those. Okay. But
That's very true. Uh, and then basically a year later, we got to like a CT scan with contrast in my heart. And I go and I sit down with him, and he's like, yep, everything looks great, man. You have an athlete's heart, so it's kind of big, but it's a little
mm,
firmer because you use it a lot. It's a muscle.
mm,
And
mhm,
I'm like, awesome. He's like, I'll see you in a year for our normal checkups now that we just spent this year of seeing each other every couple of months doing all these different tests.
mhm,
And he goes, oh, but I saw a shadow on your liver. We weren't taking a picture of your liver, but it just so the angle was coming
mm,
down.
mm,
We happened to see this. He goes, I'm going to send it back to your doc, you know, get it checked out. And I was like, oh, didn't think anything of it. Again, extremely healthy inside and out, all my
sure.
markers, all my numbers, etc. And well, needless to say, that wasn't the case. So went and got some more pictures of my liver specifically. Then that made me actually go and get the next step was a biopsy because there was a mass that was like an inch, like a little ball. And then that came back, so to say, positive for these cancer cells. So now I'm
Wow.
sitting here faced with, wait a second, I've done everything in my life,
Yeah.
to
You did
to not
everything
be
right. Hmm.
faced with these things. And it was
Hmm.
just one of those reminders of like, you can't control these things.
Sure.
You can make strong efforts to make your potential outcome, but you're not going to fight genetics. You're not going to fight, in my case, the most randomness of random things of happening inside your body.
Sure. No,
So
and that really does get to one of the things we talk about on this show, which is you can't control what happens to you in life. You can't. You can set yourself up for success, be in the right room, be in the right environment, be healthy, doing all the right things, but you can't control everything that happens to you. What you can have influence over, at least, is how you respond. And I'm sure we'll touch on that. I know, you know, I'm far from a doctor, but I know especially with liver, because my wife's mom had some serious liver issues, and yeah, I think she was a drinker, frankly. So it's probably tied to that. But just through that research we did, it's just you get into transplants and all this stuff, and the liver can be real dicey. I mean, as far as you can take out a kidney and be okay, and I'm not pretending that's no big deal, trust me, but I think that's a little more well researched and well um, established versus taking off a lobe of the liver, right? And again, I'm not pretending to be the world's leading expert on this, but serious stuff is the point. So, what was going through your mind through all of this?
I'll preface it with, for those that know me, like am very grateful for this, but kind of overly optimistic minded. And so
Mhm.
I I just assumed that it was going to be whatever the best case scenario is,
Mhm.
but doesn't mean that it wasn't scary. It just
Mhm.
was something that I look at it, you know, just like a Goggins 4x4, by 48. You look at it and you're like, this is gonna suck. But
Mhm.
I can control my mindset going into this, and I don't want
Yep.
any negativity around me. And we're
Yep.
gonna do everything we can. We got amazing health systems around us.
Yeah.
Hopkins for things that are unique and rare and
It's true.
challenging. Like, and again, I'm just very lucky to have some relationships
Hmm.
that get you in front of the right people sometimes. So,
Sure.
um,
No. So sounds like you realized it was serious, but you start pretty quickly looking at the strengths you have around you and the assets, and um, relying on. I'm guessing that it sounds like the positive mindset that you'd already built up. You had that kind of muscle memory from a mindset standpoint. Is that fair to say?
I think if you look at it in a world of fitness, right? Like, okay, you know, um, I put in a lot of reps of
Yeah. Right.
training to go, okay, this is really hard, but I beat it, or I did it, or I overcame it, from the
Right.
individual workouts
Sure.
to finding payrolls to, hard conversations with, teammates to, signing up for things that you're like, how the heck are we actually going to do that? I don't know, but we said we're going to do it. Turn around to my, kind of amazing team and go like, let's figure it out. And, we did. And so something like this, you get thrown at you. You can't control it, right?
Right.
And you go, these are the thoughts I'm having myself. I'm going like, what is it going to do for me if to go down the what if? What if this
Hmm.
is, you know, uh, leaves me with months to live? What if
Yeah.
this, and I'm like, I'm not having it. Like I'm going to go into this with what can I do to get me what can I control, right? And
Sure.
I can
Yep.
control the speed at which I get things looked at. I can control And so I did that, and again,
Hmm.
lucky to have the support that I do around me.
Hmm.
I mean, Gina, my wife, is just phew, I mean, a rock. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
and my biggest concern were my parents and her. Like, my kids
Mm.
are, they're old enough, but they look at me like, you're Superman, dad. Like, and it was like, yeah, you'll be fine. And I'm like, I just got to have a surgery, and they're gonna take this thing out, and then I might have to do some chemo, and like, I'll be good. And they're like, cool, we want to go to the movies now. And I'm like,
Right.
yeah, let's
Right.
go.
Yeah.
And that literally was the conversation with our, I had with our
And that's
three boys.
probably good for you too, though. It's refreshing to have some normalcy still, something to talk about besides the big challenge.
Yeah.
Um, so you had surgery, or how did all that go from a medical standpoint?
Yeah. So basically came back like, okay, here's the game plan based on the type of cancer that we believe that you have, where it is. We're going to do this massive surgery where they cut me from like right below the middle of my chest, all the way down to my side, basically.
At the pool, I've seen the scar, and it's impressive.
Thank you. It's not a small one.
No.
And we're going to cut you open, and we're going to take your liver out, and we're going to chop off a third of it. And then, the liver is the only organ that grows back. So they're like, it'll grow back. It just takes some time. And then we're probably going to recommend that you go on a chemo pill for 6 months every day. And
Mm.
not huge side effects with that, thankfully. Right.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, sounds, they're like, it's a very high success rate. And it definitely gave us a lot of reassurance.
Nice.
Then we went into surgery with this thought of like, oh, you're going to be in there for a couple of hours, maybe three max. It was like 7-8 hour surgery, um,
Mm.
which you didn't, at the time was, I had no clue, right? I'm out. But
Right.
everyone else was like, what's going on? And they're reassuring, everybody, Gene and the crew, that it was like, it's okay.
Mm.
He's stable. He's good.
Mhm.
Uh, and what happened was the doc got in there and he's like, look, I don't want to chop off of, basically a third of this guy's liver if I don't have to.
Mm.
So he used this analogy of a football. He's like, imagine me just cutting off a third. It would be really easy just to do that
Mhm.
faster. But I cut a hole through the football and just took
Mm.
out, about 10% of your liver.
Okay.
And I was like, cool. Well, I appreciate that. And he's like, you
Yeah.
could handle it being under for that long and all that stuff. And so my recovery, was a handful of days in, the hospital, which was kind of nice just to sit around and relax. The worst pain that I had was like I, hadn't eaten anything in a couple of days and I couldn't go to the bathroom because of all the anesthesia and stuff that I was on. So once that kind of changed,
Hmm.
you know, um, actually in my workout yesterday, I was doing box jumps and I'm going, this is the first time that I'm feeling my incision because of that like explosive throw your arms up, jump real
Hmm.
high.
Hmm.
And it wasn't painful. It was just like it was really like tight. And
Hmm. Yeah.
I had again lucky. Like hadn't had any pain discomfort from the actual incision. It was all my insides getting all torn apart and
Hmm.
put back together and you know,
Right.
the effects of that.
And so how long ago was the surgery?
5 months.
Gotcha. I mean, yeah, you wouldn't be able to tell. I mean, it's just besides the incision and the scarring. I mean, yeah, it's amazing how well you've overcome this. And I don't want to act like it's fully behind us or but it just from an outside perspective, it's super impressive.
Well, I am happy to share that I had my first follow-up CT scan and came back crystal clear, everything positive. So
Nice. That's
that was
awesome.
that was Friday, last Friday call for me. So
Nice. Super cool. So obviously there's so much to this. We could, many rabbit holes we could go down, and I know you wanted to, we were talking beforehand slightly about the effects of COVID on the business but before we get to that, I'm just curious, um, how did you miss, how much time did you have to miss due to the cancer?
um I truly took off 2 weeks.
Okay. Now,
Well,
did
week
that
and a
have
half.
enough? Because we've had guests on the show who've overcome some also very serious health challenges, and sometimes if it's weeks or months, they realize that the, they really didn't have a business. It was a one-man show in a sense, or at least the business, significantly suffered because of their absence. Granted, a week and a half, 2 weeks is not, it's not super long, but what were the effects on the business with your absence?
I mean, thankfully, and the reason why we can do all these things that we do it is not me by any means. Like I've got, a core team that is unlike anyone else out there.
Hmm.
We have some mantras that we all sort of say carry and represent really well. And I think if you think about, one of them is GSD, like get stuff done.
Hmm.
And that's just a
Yeah.
mindset of like, yeah, Nate's out. And I had to do a bunch of tests and all that stuff before. So I mean, it was
Right. Right. It wasn't just the
right,
week and a half. Right.
right. But
Yep.
it was like a week and a half where I was like, hey guys, I'm not checking in. It was all just, sending you love and hugs and
Mhm.
prayers. Right. And I'm like, I'm good. But then I was like, oh, no, I'm just gonna relax for a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
and that, having that team, like, yeah, everything kept going and growing and big decisions kept being made. And I mean, it's I, all of these things are a factor into why I could go into this, moment in my life, which is hands down personally the hardest thing that I've ever,
Sure.
gone through, where I'm like, it really wasn't that hard, but it it was, right?
Right.
Like
Well,
there's
sure. And
yeah.
I think it probably would have been much harder. I mean, just, projecting here, but if you had a lot of stress with your business, how much harder would that have been, mentally to get through this the personal health challenge? I mean, that it all works together. So, yeah, that's awesome. So regarding the effect of COVID, just we're running out of time, but as far as your business is set up for people to physically come to these locations. So how did 2020 treat you from a business standpoint? 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, so definitely the hardest business kind of challenge that we've ever had. And I mean, just imagine this. So we had spent 2 years getting to a place where we are finalized a contract and a launch date with one of the largest health systems in the country that's in Dallas, Fort Worth. And we were going to take over 9 fitness centers, management of them, March 29th, 2020.
Wow.
So I'm in, this outdoor great barbecue place, with kind of the 2 senior, level executives of this health system.
Mhm.
And, we're sitting there, and it was the 13th of March, and we're going, this probably isn't going to happen. They're like, it's not going to happen. And the part that makes me just feel so proud is that we sat there, something that we had worked 2 years to get to, and something like this suddenly comes into play. And we basically just left there with like, hey, you guys have a bunch of stuff to figure out as a health system to manage what's coming.
Mhm.
Don't worry about, like, we can do a simple pause contract and we'll just figure it out when the time is right.
Hmm.
As opposed to, a typical $5 billion organization, as they are, would not do that, right? It was
Mhm.
all these things, but we had the relationship and the trust where we
Mhm.
could be like, yeah, you're not going to come back to us with contractual this and you should do this thing.
Mhm.
And obviously, the COVID happened. So all the
Yep.
fitness centers there got shut down on March 16th. In Maryland, we got an awesome, 4-hour notice that effective today, at 4 o'clock.
Wow.
Never forget that moment. We're all sitting around the TV, like, we're fighting this thing, we're gonna ride it
Right.
out, to like, all right, we don't have an option anymore. Uh,
Mhm.
where we closed, I mean, everything. And again, fortunate to have some great advisors around me where they're like, hey, plan for this to be at least a year.
Hmm.
So get everybody, on unemployment, get them, like, so to say, first in line,
Yeah.
including yourself, right? Like, you gotta set yourself
Sure.
up to where this is long term. Worst case scenario, it's not, then you can,
Right. You're
figure it
ready.
out. And
So
so they
2
really
weeks
help.
to flatten the curve, though, I thought.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Anyway,
All of those
um,
things were,
yeah.
but this was kind of the hindsight, or now looking back
Right.
and
Right.
going, okay, so at that moment, I was the most defeated I've ever been.
Mm.
Scared out of my mind of like, okay,
Mm.
so everything I've worked on, and I mean worked
Right.
uh relentlessly hard, and
Yeah.
so many other people, is
Right.
just, and there is no timeline, there is no control, there, like, all these things that are scary and
Yeah.
hard. And we basically took, a few weeks of going, okay, this is real. It's going to take a longer than a few weeks to flatten the curve down. And
Mhm.
what can we do? And
Right.
so we kind of like PPP money, a lot of
Yeah.
business that are familiar with that, so
Sure.
we got some of that. But I'm going, we can't even open our doors though, like, there's no way for us to really generate revenue. So how
Right.
about we bring back kind of the management team and start working on the things that we want to do once we do reopen, but
Mhm.
also making a shift of like, what can we do now? We have a digital product. We
Mhm.
have, these events that we do, some virtual, but mainly they're all like on site and in person.
Mhm.
And so we put this strategy together of like, okay, we're still getting a few requests for these events that are virtual. So we just
Mhm.
ramped up, our four or five virtual events that we probably had to,
Mhm.
40 pages that we have now.
Mm.
And so, we
Wow.
we ramped up that side of our business pretty quickly. And then how do we deliver? And then we're like bringing people back to deliver those kind of services. And then, our kind of partners in Texas called first, and then our partners at Under Armour called next about, all right, let's get the gym back open.
Hmm.
And then we have 2 other gyms in Baltimore. And so we opened up our Light Street location, and then our Hunt Valley location. Again, another thing of like a month after COVID, so to say, shutdown, we had a massive flood
Yeah.
that, you
Just
know,
what you needed.
I mean, I never felt so kicked while
Yeah.
laying than ever
I
before.
remember seeing you at Joe's house, and I said, how's it going? It was probably, I don't know what, it was, I don't know when that was. It was either 2020 summer or 2021, but you said not well, not going well at all. I was like, oh, I was just, but yeah. So would you say your business is better off because you went through all that at this point?
I'm positive. I kind of preached to our team here that this is going to make us stronger. And whether it was, liver cancer or COVID, there's something about going through these extreme challenges, seeing who's going to stick with you, right? And who's going to pull others along, right? Like it's not just me. It's like, okay, there's other,
Right.
leaders in the organization that are like, are you who's coming with me?
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
Like and pulling people together and then, literally inspiring them through this time where you're going like, I actually don't know what's going to happen next month,
right.
but
But we're gonna
we,
figure it out
we're going to figure it out and we're going to do it together and we're going to do
together.
it with a positive mindset.
Yeah.
And, and we're going to stay aligned on what our mission is as an organization, which is to make a
Yeah.
positive impact in people's lives. And I'm like, we're going to find a way to do that. And
That's
so,
awesome.
you know,
Yeah.
regardless. So we're
Awesome.
definitely, you know, I think all of us individually and as an organization are better off because of it, but I don't know if we would want to do it again.
Yeah, that's a similar theme I've gotten from other guests. I'm not seeking out adversity, but I am better off because of it. Um, so do you have 2 more minutes?
Yes, sir.
I'll fire off some real quick rapid fire questions and then we'll wrap up. Um, if you could have coffee with any historical figure, who would you choose?
Oh man. Alive or dead?
Yeah, either they'll be alive when you're having coffee with them, but
Um
yeah,
man. See, I love the kind of, so to say, like early times where you're going, just tell me what it was like George Washington, right?
sure.
Tell me
Yeah.
like Martin Luther King. Like I would love
Yeah.
to understand how did he do what he did from a inspire, literally change the world.
Yeah.
Um,
That's awesome. Love it.
so those guys
Perfect.
and many
If
more.
you go ahead, what's that?
Oh, and many more. There's
Oh
like,
yeah. Yeah. If you were given $10 million tomorrow, just someone wrote you a check, you personally, what would you do with it?
oof, um, $10 million check.
I'm not saying you don't have 10 million, but if someone gave you a $10 million check tomorrow, what would you do with it?
Yeah. Honestly, the the level of passion, right, is obviously to help other people, because of the industry that we're in, but it's more about kids. And so for me, that like pulls on my strings the most.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I take what we do as an organization and deliver it to the youth that don't have access to it?
Mm-hmm.
That could really make a big
Yeah,
difference. Being in Baltimore, there's so much need here. So,
sure. Absolutely.
and I will say just quick, one of our cool partnerships is with Volo Sports, and
Okay.
Volo has this really awesome nonprofit where they bring kids and they play sports for free. And we're working with them to figure out how do we also bring in kind of that health and fitness component. So they already have the audience in Baltimore City here and
That's
across
awesome.
the country. So super
Super
pumped.
cool. Nice. All right. What's a book or two that you'd recommend for the audience?
Some classics. Good to Great is one I'm re-listening to right now.
Jim Collins. Yep. That's
Collins.
good.
And then, as we talked a little bit about before this, but we're implementing EOS into
Mm-hmm.
so the book's called Traction, which is
Yeah.
as a business owner, something that I felt we did a lot of the components of it, but having an actual structure to take it all the way, to make sure you're having quarterly offsites and what your main priorities, what your rocks are, and you
Hmm.
know, evaluating your team where you're like gets it, wants it, has the capacity to do it, right
Yeah.
person, right seat.
Would you say is there a specific level of business that is EOS too heavy and too expensive for, a very small business? What level would you say that is where it makes sense?
Yeah, I actually feel that it's designed more for the small, you're doing hundreds of thousands of dollars and
Mhm.
maybe, up to a few hundred million
Okay.
from a revenue perspective. But
Yep.
again, size, once you get bigger, there's a lot of, more things. I think it's really designed for those companies that are in that sweet spot there.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Awesome. So we're going to wrap up here. What is there anything you want to plug or talk about that you have going on? Anything other than what you've mentioned already?
Honestly, I just probably take more of this last little bit to thank you for having me on
Yeah.
this show, man. And I look forward to our next Saturday morning workout. And for my recent kind of challenge, the kind of biggest takeaway for me was the number of people in my life that love and support, me.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it's really much just like, thanks to my family, thanks to
Yeah.
my FX team, literally wouldn't be here without y'all.
Yeah. Puts things in perspective and helps you appreciate what you do have. That's awesome. So, if any of our listeners do want to reach out to you, is there a way they can reach out online, or just your company website, or where should people check you out?
Yeah, so two main websites, fxwell.com and fxstudios.com. And then, my anybody wants to reach out to me personally, it's Nate at fxwell.com. Love talking to, other folks about what we do and what they do. And it's kind of how I've learned some of those lessons over time when you go, I didn't know that you went through that. How about what did you do? And
Yeah, yeah,
vice versa. So
that's awesome. Well, Nate Costa, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Do appreciate it very much. And yeah, maybe I'll see you Saturday morning.
can't wait.
We'll see if
Appreciate you,
Joe.
man.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see if Joe's over his COVID yet. But um, anyway, to our listeners out there, thank you so much for spending your most valuable resource with us, and that's your time. Thanks, everyone. Take care.